Well, hello. Ooh, it's bright in here. I am thinking about calmness, nervous system regulation, lots of things up in this headspace here. And I thought I would pop on and share a little and also invite more conversation about what I'm about to talk about. So, the things on my mind are how we tend toward an extreme, or maybe it's just me, how some of us are wired toward extremes. I think humans in general are wired toward extremes, some more than others. I personally am a relatively extreme person, I think, by a lot of measures and a lot of aspects of my life, not all, and certainly, not compared to some. And that's one of the things I was thinking about. Let me back up and start with a saying that a friend of mine, a former friend of mine, used to say a lot, probably still says, which is argue for your limitations and they shall remain yours. And he would say that to me when I was arguing for my limitations, talking about, the excuses, the reasons why I felt held back. Often like the whole universe was conspiring against me to some extent. And in that same vein of conversation, he once said, probably the whole universe isn't conspiring against you. Just try thinking of it as like one thing at a time. And you can tackle one thing at a time, but not the whole universe. And that was helpful. But since those days, I've reflected on that phrase quite a bit. I've even used it myself. I've had people push back to me when I've used it because there's an aspect of that phrase, argue for your limitations and they shall remain yours, which implies that your limitations are of your own doing. And while I actually do think that that is true to some extent, the thing that I was just reflecting on this morning is like, while it's somewhat true, on the one hand, arguing for your limitations can keep them prevalent, keep them reoccurring, telling that story about, poor me, the victim me, nobody likes me. That makes it more and more true. For example, telling a story even about my chronic illness, my stress, my trauma, all those things coming from true places, but in a way propagate the story, the truth of them in my life. And on a subconscious level, when I'm making that part of my identity, I have learned over decades of tough learning of life school that making those aspects part of my identity, my life story, tends to create more scenarios that recreate that same cycle, that same story of being a victim, of being unable, of being not enough, being unlovable, being illegitimate. These are all common stories that I have told in my life and have in that way, by retelling them, kept them part of my story, kept them alive. And at the same time, I believe strongly in expression and exploring and untangling our emotions. Big part of what I spent the last 5 years or so working on was this book, The Shift, Own Your Emotions, Own Your Life. And that was the result of me trying to figure out how to express my core belief that expression is really important. That's meta, right? I have learned through suppressing emotions, through not learning healthy ways of expressing my emotions, that causes turbulence, stagnation, and then disease in the body, chronic disease. So it's one thing if you come across a bacteria or virus, or you fall and cut yourself. Those are all more acute things. But when something is reoccurring for months, for years, in my case, decades, then clearly there's something in my habits that's recreating it. And I've had patterns of chronic pain, chronic dysfunction, and chronic dysfunction would probably be the good catch-all term for it. But recognizable patterns in my life that I have to, at some point, have had to turn around and go like, okay, this has to be me. I'm the one common denominator in these patterns, in this pattern. And there's a lot of nuances to all of that I've uncovered for myself. I've been doing a lot of shadow work, some of which I've shared here. Gathered a lot of tools for practicing regulation, which I share in my book. But the thing I was, I guess, thinking about and weighing in that seesaw part of my brain between arguing for limitations and they shall be yours is this other side of things, of deny your limitations, like ignore the actual facts of what's happening in your body and around you. And you can end up a slave to those things. So you can pay too much attention to your limitations, or put your focus on things that you don't want, and inadvertently end up creating more of what you don't want, because what we focus on does grow. Our thoughts, our focus is a very potent energy, and when we turn our attention to things, that feeds it with our energy, and so it's likely to grow. At the same time, if it's something that's there catching our attention in our subconscious, maybe through a pain or a chronic thing maybe through, like I've described, a pattern that we're recognizing, but we're suppressing. So we're not dealing with it. We're not acknowledging it consciously, maybe. Then it can rule our lives. In fact, these are the things that often rule and ruin, to be hyperbolic about it, but these are the things that keep people from gaining what they want in life, from repeating these same cycles over and over and going like, why does this always happen to me? Or how come I keep spiraling in the wrong direction? You can ask me how I know about all that. I've experienced all of this firsthand, been learning it viscerally. So on the one hand, to pay too much attention to our limitations, as in to use them as our life story, identify with them, can be very limiting. And on the other hand, to act like we don't have the limitations that we do, it gets tricky, because I'm an advocate of having unrealistic expectations a lot of the time. But I've fallen down really hard. I've gotten smacked around by my unwillingness to look at reality at times. And I think there's a distinction to be made that's trying to be made in my brain here, between that recklessness that has gotten me smacked around sometimes, but still worth it, by like risk taking, pushing the boundaries. There's an aspect of that I'm drawn for, I'm here for, and I'm still a fan of. But there's it's that shadow the reason I did this 10-day shadow reset before the new year, why it's fresh on my mind, is there are things about our natural limitations. For me, it's been a lot about like being neurodivergent, as it's called recently. The things that come with, like, I don't care so much for the labels: ADHD, autism, neurodivergence, neurospiciness, all of those labels I could wear, PTSD, personality disorders. Those are all labels that describe or attempt to, compartmentalize certain behaviors, certain traits. And while I don't really favor the labels, I do see the benefit of looking at those traits and how they might be limitations and superpowers, both at different times in different contexts. That gets tricky, and I've had people come at me for calling certain disabilities potential superpowers, and I understand why. Because it's when you're in the throes of feeling the limitation of a disability from this perspective of society, or your own identity, your own sense of being able to do what you want to do, or someone else's sense of what you should be able to do. I believe me, again, I've been in that from a lot of different angles, probably not all the angles, but a lot. And so I know how painful it can be. I know how frustrating it can be, and I know how extra like salt in the wounds it feels like when someone's, outside of that, just saying, stop thinking that way, or believe, look at things differently, or you're bringing that shit on yourself. So, just acknowledging that. I don't think any of this is perfect, but I don't think that the imperfection of it should stop us from having conversations about it. And I understand some people will disagree with me. I've had some people come at me pretty adamantly, saying that the conversation can be harmful. And I understand the potential, and I think the potential harm of being silent outweighs the potential harm of having these conversations. But hey, that's my opinion. That's just like my opinion, man. I'd love to know what your opinion is. If you have any opinions on any of that, that was a lot. Yeah, I think the summary of what I'm trying to get at is that there's a duality, and that either extreme can be too extreme, that again, we should be pointing toward that center point to balance, even if we choose to take one side or the other of this, not arguing for limitations or not denying our limitations and being realistic. And myself, I seesaw back and forth, and I am always trying to aim for that center point of more clarity, while at the same time exploring the outer edges, because I feel like without that dynamic back and forth, I don't get as much out of it as I want. So that's me. How about you? Tell me about you. I would love to know. I'm noticing the sun is bouncing off my glasses. I thank you if you've popped in here. Just doing these random live streams, often at 1:11 or 3:33 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Those are some of my favorite times to pop on. But I am also working on revamping the channel here, and my Sleeping Dragons business, and my Authentic Action Academy podcast and school group, which is free right now. So if you're interested in any of that, check it out. I am running 3-day resets every month in my Human Reboot Dojo, and there's an invite to that over in the Authentic Action Academy. Both of those are on the school platform with a K, and lots of exciting stuff happening over there. So I encourage you to check that out. If anything I'm saying resonates for you, or you're feeling curious and would like to learn more really about anything, the school platform has almost anything you can imagine over there. Over there, it's just right a click away. It's right here, really. I hope you're enjoying whatever you're into. Don't forget to get some on you. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Ciao for now. Bye.